The prairie was quiet that morning, too quiet for a land that usually whistled with wind and the cry of hawks. Mary Whitlock stood outside her small clay hut, a thin trail of smoke curling from the chimney into the pale dawn sky. Her hands were red from washing clothes in the creek. Her breath fogged as she whispered a prayer over the fire. Behind her, her children stirred, a boy of 9 and a girl just 6, rubbing their eyes against the cold. "Eli," she said softly, "fetch more kindling. We'll need it before noon." The boy nodded, shivering in his threadbare shirt. Grace followed him, holding tight to a broken doll missing half its face. The world around them was endless, rolling fields, dry grass, and the broken fence that once marked their husband and father's land. He'd been gone since winter. The fever took him, and with him went everything that kept his family steady. Mary still clung to faith. She'd promised herself that no matter how empty the cupboards got, her children would never see her bend. But fate has its own schedule on the frontier. It started with a dog's bark. Short, sharp, urgent. Then came the tremor of hooves. Mary's head snapped up. Eli froze by the fence, kindling spilling from his arms. A small dust cloud moved fast on the horizon. 3 riders. No neighbors this far out. No good men rode this early unless trouble followed. "Inside," she shouted. They scrambled into the hut. Mary grabbed her husband's rifle from above the door, unloaded, but she lifted it anyway. Her heart thumped hard enough she could feel it in her throat. The riders drew up outside, all shadow and grit, faces hidden by scarves. One swung from the saddle, boots crunching the frost. "Morning, missus," he called. "You the widow Whitlock?" She didn't answer. The man spat in the dirt. "Landlord says rent's overdue. We came to collect." "I paid what I could," she said, voice trembling but steady enough. "The rest will come with the spring harvest." The leader's grin was all teeth. "Spring's a long way off." He looked around, saw the hut's small roof, the wagon half broken behind the corral, the empty chicken coop. He gave a laugh, short and cruel. "Ain't worth the paper it's written on." The next sound was a match. She lunged forward, screaming, "No!" But the fire hit the wall before she reached him. The dry thatch went up like gunpowder. Eli yelled. Grace cried. Mary pulled him out the back door as smoke burst through the roof. The flames roared, orange and violent, devouring her life piece by piece. "Don't look!" she shouted, dragging her children toward the field. Behind her, the men laughed. "You'll remember to pay next time," one of them called, and the sound of horses faded into the distance. When it was over, there was nothing but a blackened frame and a sky full of ash. The air stank of burning pine and loss. Mary stood barefoot in the frost, her breath shaking. She looked at her children, faces streaked with soot and tears, and then at the ashes that had once been home. "Come," she whispered. "We keep walking." The prairie wind swallowed her voice. They walked until her legs gave out. She fell to her knees on a rocky ridge as the sun dipped low. Eli dropped beside her, clutching her arm. Grace sobbed quietly. Mary looked back one last time. Her hut was a dark smudge in the distance, just another ruin on a land that forgot the weak. She whispered a prayer that never left her lips. The prairie answered with silence. By noon the next day, Mary had no strength left to walk. Her feet bled from the sharp grass. Eli tried to help, but he was just a boy, and the cold bit deep. The land rolled endlessly, a sea of gold and dust, and then, far ahead, a dark shape moved. A rider. At first, Mary thought it was death come to finish what the fire began. But as he drew closer, she saw a man wrapped in a long coat, a rifle slung behind his shoulder, the brim of his hat shadowing sharp eyes. He reined in his horse a few yards away. "You lost." His voice was rough, low like gravel. She didn't answer. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the dry soil. "Name's Elias Crane," he said. "I seen smoke yesterday. Thought it might be Indians, but it weren't. It was you, wasn't it?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Grace hid behind her skirt. He looked past her, to the children, the blistered feet, the ash on their faces. Something shifted behind his eyes. hard to name, but it wasn't pity. "What happened?" he asked. "Men," she rasped. "They said they came for rent. They burned my home." Elias frowned, jaw tightening. "Who'd they ride for?" "I don't know." Didn't wait to ask. He studied her a long moment. Wind pushed dust between them. Then, without a word, he knelt and offered a canteen. She hesitated. Pride flickered in her chest. She hated needing help, but her children's hollow eyes broke her resolve. She drank, then passed it to Eli. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "We'll find town by night." He shook his head. "Town's 15 miles east. You won't make it before dark. Wolves out that way, too." She looked away, voice breaking. "We'll take our chances." He sighed. "Stubborn woman." He motioned toward his horse. "Get on. You'll stay at my place tonight." Mary flinched. "No, I can't take Charity." He met her gaze, steady, unreadable. "Ain't charity. It's decency." For a moment, she thought she saw pain behind his calm. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold quiet of a man who'd seen too much war. She climbed up behind him, children clinging tight. The horse snorted, then started west toward the setting sun. They rode in silence for miles. The wind whipped her hair into her face, the scent of burning still clinging to her clothes. "Why'd you help us?" she finally asked. He didn't turn his head. "Because somebody should have helped my ma when she needed it." The words hung heavy in the air. When they reached his ranch, dusk had settled. The cabin stood solid and lonely. Timber walls, smoke curling from a stone chimney. A corral sat empty, and a single lantern burned by the porch. He dismounted, then helped her down. "Ain't much," he muttered, "but it's warm." Inside, the place smelled with smoke and old coffee. There were maps on the wall, a Bible on the shelf, and rifles leaning in the corner. The silence was thick. Elias lit another lamp, its glow softening his stern face. "You and the kids take the bed. I'll sleep out here." She turned to him. "You're a stranger." "True," he said, pulling off his hat. "But I'm not the kind that burns huts." That shut her up. The children ate stew like wild things, spoons clinking fast. Mary took hers slower, tasting warm for the first time in days. Elias sat by the fire, staring into it like it held ghosts. After a while, she said, "Thank you." He didn't look at her. "Don't thank me yet. You brought trouble with you." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "They'll come back," he said flatly. "Men who do that kind of thing don't like loose ends." Mary froze. The sound of wind outside felt sharper now. "You think they'll find us?" He didn't answer. Outside, a coyote howled. Inside, the fire popped and spat. Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes shadowed. "Get some sleep? I'll keep watch." She wanted to ask more, but exhaustion hit her like a wave. She gathered her children close on the bed, whispering a prayer they'd never hear. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was Elias by the window, rifle in hand, the lamplight turning his face half gold, half darkness. Sometime deep into the night, Mary woke to the sound of boots. Not Elias's. He hadn't moved from the window, but outside, the crunch of hooves. Her breath caught. She slid off the bed, motioning the children to stay quiet. Elias's rifle was already raised. He turned slightly toward her, eyes like steel. "You hear it," she whispered. He nodded. 4 riders. Maybe 5. Fear tightened her chest. "It's them." He didn't reply, only cocked the rifle. The sound was soft but final. Minutes passed. Then a whistle cut the air. One of the men called out, "Crane, we know you're in there. Hand over the woman, and we'll let you live." Mary clamped a hand over Grace's mouth. Elias's voice came low, even. "You brought them to my door." "I didn't mean to." He held up a hand. "Ain't blaming you. But from now on, we do things my way." She nodded, trembling. He moved to the door, careful and slow. His shadow stretched long across the cabin floor. "Stay down," he ordered. Mary's heart pounded so hard she thought the men outside might hear it. She looked at her children, pale, shaking, and something inside her hardened. She'd lost one home. She wouldn't lose another. Elias opened the door, just a crack. The night was black, except for the moonlight glinting off gun barrels. "Back away," he warned. Laughter answered him. Then a bullet ripped through the doorframe. Elias fired back, the flash lighting his face. The echo rolled across the plains. The bandits scattered, shouting curses. The horses thundered off, but not far. They were testing him, waiting. Elias lowered the rifle, eyes cold. They'll try again before sunrise. Mary swallowed. Then what do we do? He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something human behind his hardness. "You pray, missus. I'll do the rest." He sat back by the fire, reloading. The lamplight flickered over his hands. Steady, practiced, ruthless. Mary gathered her children under the blanket, listening to the wind lash against the walls. Sleep didn't come easy. Each creak, each howl outside made her heart skip. She stared into the fire until dawn began to creep under the door, pale and cold. When Elias finally looked her way, she was still awake. "They gone?" she asked. "For now," he said. "But they'll be back. Men like that don't forget." He turned toward the window, his jaw set. "If they come again, I'll be ready." Mary pulled her children closer. Her voice was small, trembling but steady. "Then so will I." The prairie wind howled again, sweeping the ashes of her old life into the distance. That night, 3 strangers slept under one roof, and none knew what dawn would bring. Morning came thin and gray over plains. The fire in the hearth had burned embers, and the cabin smelled of smoke and iron. Mary stirred before the children, her eyes gritty from a sleepless night. The sound of Elias Crane moving outside reached her, boots crunching frost, the quiet jingle of a saddle strap. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. The air bit her skin. Elias stood by the corral, his broad frame dark against the dim light, a rifle slung low. "You've been out there all night," she said. He didn't turn, didn't trust the quiet. He knelt, brushing the dirt. "Tracks," he muttered. 4 men, maybe 5. Rode close, then split. Could mean they're watching. Mary's breath caught. "They're coming back." He straightened, eyes cold as winter. Men like that don't ride far after fire. They'll want to finish what they started. Mary looked toward the horizon, where the pale sun crawled up from behind the hills. "You could send us away. We're trouble for you." Elias's jaw flexed. "Trouble's already here. And I ain't one to turn women and children into the cold." She wanted to argue, but there was something in his tone that left no room. By the time the children woke, Elias had fetched water, sharpened his knife, and cleaned his rifle. The smell of coffee filled the small cabin. Eli sat quietly at the table, watching him with wide eyes. "Were you a soldier?" the boy asked. Elias paused. "Once." "Did you shoot people?" The question hung heavy. Mary started to hush the boy, but Elias just nodded slowly. "When I had to. Sometimes when I didn't have to. War don't always give you a choice." Eli swallowed. "My pa fought once too. Said killing never leave your hands." Elias met the boy's gaze. "Your pa was right." Outside, a hawk cried. The land stretched silent and endless, the kind of silence that listens back. Mary worked quietly, patching Grace's torn dress with shaking hands. Each breath felt like borrowed time. Every sound outside, the creak of a tree, the flap of a shutter, made her heart jump. Elias saddled his horse. "I'll check the ridge. If I'm not back by sundown, bolt the door and keep the rifle close." Mary stepped forward. "What if they come while you're gone?" He gave her a long look. "Then you remember what I said. Pray first, shoot second." And with that, he rode off into the gold-gray light. Hours passed like days. The cabin walls seemed to close in with each gust of wind. The children whispered to each other, playing with pebbles on the floor. By late afternoon, the door creaked open. Elias stepped in, dust-covered, eyes hard. "They're out there," he said quietly. 3 of the same men, one new, saw their camp by the river. "They ain't far." Mary felt the blood drain from her face. "What'll we do?" He set down his rifle. We wait. The day turned quiet again, too quiet. The kind that presses against your ribs. Mary hung laundry on the line, glancing toward the hills. The children fed the horse, their laughter soft but strained. For a heartbeat, it felt almost normal. Then came the crack. A single gunshot split the air. The bucket by her feet exploded in a spray of water. Down! Elias shouted from the porch. He fired back before the echo died. The roar of his rifle tore through the calm. Mary dug behind the trough, pulling Grace with her. Eli flattened himself against the wall. Another shot whistled past, splintering with inches from Elias's head. He rolled, aimed, and fired again, fast, deliberate. Dust rose from the distant ridge where the outlaws crouched. 3 of them, he barked, 4th circling the back. Mary's pulse hammered. She grabbed the spare rifle from inside, heavy in her trembling hands, and peered out the window. A shadow moved near the barn. Without thinking, she fired. The recoil slammed her shoulder, the sound deafening. The shadow fell. Her stomach twisted. Did I kill him? Elias glanced, still firing. You hit him. That's all that matters right now. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Silence rolled back over the plains, thick as fog. Elias crouched low, reloading. They'll pull back to tend their wounded. Not gone, though. Never that easy. Mary's hand shook. The rifle felt like it burned her palms. A groan came from behind the barn. One man hadn't died, just wounded. Elias started toward him, but Mary stepped in front of the door. Let me? He frowned. You. I won't have blood drying on your soul because of me, she said. He's down. Let me see him. She moved outside, heart pounding. The man lay in the dirt, young, barely more than a boy. Blood seeped through his shirt where the bullet grazed his shoulder. His eyes darted between fear and disbelief. Don't kill me, he stammered. Mary knelt, pressing cloth against the wound. Hold still. Elias stood over them, gun still raised. He ain't worth savant. She looked up, meeting his eyes. You said you weren't the kind that burned huts. Don't prove yourself wrong. For a moment, his expression hardened, then softened just enough. He lowered the barrel. Fine, he muttered, but he stays tied. They dragged the boy into the barn, bound his hands, and set him in the hay. He winced as Mary cleaned the wound with trembling care. What's your name? She asked. Jeb, he murmured. Didn't mean to hurt nobody. They said it was just a scare. I didn't know they'd burn it. Who's they? Elias demanded. Jeb hesitated. Harlan Pike. Owns the land up near Red Butte. Hires us to collect debts. He'll come looking once he knows I'm gone. Elias's face darkened. Harlan Pike. He spat the name like poison. I know that bastard. Mary looked at him sharply. How? He ran supply lines for both sides in the war. Made money off blood. Been buying up land since. Jeb's eyes darted. You don't know him like I do. He don't forgive. Mary's stomach turned. Then he'll come for us. Elias's jaw set. Let him try. The young bandit looked at Mary, his voice trembling. You should leave before he does. He'll burn this place too. She straightened, her hand still on the bandage. No, she said quietly. I'm done running. Elias looked at her then, really looked at her. The soot stains had faded, but the fire in her eyes had not. You talk like you've been out here your whole life, he said. I've lost too much to keep losing, she replied. The wind outside picked up, pushing dust through slats. Elias glanced toward the door. Storm's coming, he muttered, and not just from the sky. By dusk, the wind turned wild. Thunder rolled low over plains. The air smelled of rain and blood. Elias and Mary worked in silence, patching the windows, moving the children's bedding to the far wall. The boy, Jeb, sat bound in the barn, pale and sweating. Grace huddled close to the hearth, whispering to her doll. Eli stood beside Elias, trying to look brave. When the storm hits, Elias said, stay low. Pike's men might use it to cover their move. Mary looked up sharply. You think they'd attack in the rain? He nodded. Men like Pike don't wait for daylight when hate's in their belly. Lightning flashed through the cracks, lighting Elias's scarred face in brief, ghostly bursts. He looked like a man carved from old grief. "You hate him," Mary said softly. Elias's eyes flicked toward her. "I do." "Because of the war?" "Because he sold bullets to both sides, and the one that killed my brother came from his wagons." Mary's heart twisted. "And yet you save his hired boy." He stared into the fire. "Guess that's your doing. Your kind of mercy's contagious." She smiled faintly, weary but genuine. "Then maybe it's worth catching." The thunder cracked loud enough to shake the windows. Elias moved the door, peering out into the storm. Rain began to pour, drumming hard on the roof. "See anything?" she asked. He didn't answer. Another flash of lightning, and then she saw it too. 5 riders on the ridge, torches flickering through the downpour. "They're here," Elias said. Mary's breath hitched. "What do we do?" "Pray," he said again, loading the rifle, "and keep those kids close." He took his place by the window, steady as a stone. Mary grabbed the pistol he'd left on the table. Her hands no longer shook. Thunder swallowed the first shots. The glass shattered beside Elias's head. He fired back, the flash lighting his face. Rain blew in, mixing with the smoke. Grace screamed. Eli pulled her under the table. Mary fired once, twice, missed the first, hit the second. A shadow fell from his horse. The storm howled louder. Elias shouted, "They're flanking left." She ran to the door, heart hammering, and fired into the dark. The muzzle flash cut through the rain. Then silence. For a long moment, nothing moved, only the hiss of the storm and the crackle of the fire behind them. Elias stepped outside, rain running down his coat. Bodies lay scattered near the corral. The torches had burned out, steam rising from the wet earth. Mary followed, the pistol still in her grip. Her dress clung to her legs, soaked through. Elias lowered his rifle. "Pike ain't with them, just his dogs." Lightning flashed again, showing the young outlaw Jeb standing at the barn door, free of his ropes. He stared at them, guilt and fear in his eyes. "I didn't tell him where you were," he said. "I swear it." Elias raised his gun slightly. "Then why cut yourself loose?" "To help." Jeb's voice cracked. "They'll come again, more of them. Pike don't forgive. But I can show you the way to his camp. Maybe stop him first." Mary stepped forward. "You'd help us?" The boy nodded. "You saved me. Ain't right to leave you to burn too." Elias looked at him a long moment, rain dripping for his hat brim. "You lead us wrong, and I'll bury you myself." Jeb nodded again. "Fair enough." The thunder rolled one last time, echoing across the prairie. Elias looked at Mary, then at the horizon beyond the storm. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we end this." Mary's eyes met his. Together, lightning lit their faces, 2 souls worn by loss, standing unbroken in the rain. The storm broke by morning. The plain steamed beneath a pale sun, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and gunpowder. Smoke still curled from the blackened ground where Pike's men had fallen. Elias Crane stood by his horse, cinching the saddle straps tight. His eyes were hard and distant, like a man already halfway to gallows. Mary watched him from the doorway, her hair damp, her dress wrinkled from a sleepless night. "You're still set on going," she said quietly. He looked up at her. "A man like Pike don't stop till someone puts him in the dirt. Better it be me. And if it's you in the dirt?" He didn't answer. He just checked his rifle, tested the weight of it in his hands, and swung into the saddle. Mary stepped closer, blocking the path. "You think this ends with a gun? You think vengeance will bury your ghosts?" Elias met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, she saw the man beneath the scars, weary, wounded, not cruel but consumed. "No," he said finally, "but it'll keep yours safe." Behind them, Jeb stood waiting beside his own horse, pale but resolute. His arm was bandaged, his face still streaked with dirt. "I can show you the trail to Pike's camp. It's old mining ground, narrow, rocky, good for ambushes. He'll have watchers." Elias nodded. "Then we ride quiet and fast." Mary gripped the porch post to steady herself. You're both walking into death." Elias gave her a faint, bitter smile. Wouldn't be the first time. He started to ride off, but she reached out and caught his hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rainwater still glistened on his skin. "Bring him down," she whispered. "Then come back." He nodded once. "I'll try." Then he was gone, hooves pounding over wet ground, Jeb close behind. The plains open before them, endless, wide, and cruelly beautiful. The sky still hung low and gray, with streaks of morning light cutting through like blades. Every sound seemed too loud. The creak of leather, the rhythmic thud of hooves, the wind whispering through dry grass. They followed the river north, toward Red Butte. The land grew harsher, rock spires jutting like broken teeth, gullies choked with dead brush. After an hour, Jeb raised a hand. "We're close," he whispered. "See that ridge? Pike's camp's just beyond. He's got maybe 6 men left, but they're mean. They'll shoot before they speak." Elias dismounted. "Then we move on foot." They tied the horses under a bluff and crept through the scrub. The smell of smoke drifted faintly on the wind. Voices carried, laughter, harsh and cold. Elias crawled up the ridge until he could see the camp below. A few tents, a wagon, a fire burning low. Around it, 5 men sat cleaning rifles. At the center sat Pike. The man was broad, silver-haired, his hat tipped low. Even from here, Elias could see the scar that ran from his jaw to his ear. A mark he remembered all too well. Pike was chewing tobacco, calm as Sunday morning. Elias whispered, "He looks smaller than I remember." "That's what happens when you stop being afraid," Jeb murmured. Elias glanced at him. "You stay back. This ain't your fight." But Jeb shook his head. "It became mine when you didn't kill me." The older man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He chambered around and steadied his breathing. Then he rose. The rifle cracked once. The bullet tore through the air, striking the coffee pot by Pike's fire and shattering it into a spray of boiling liquid. The camp exploded into chaos. Men dove for cover, cursing. Pike spun around, bellowing orders. "Crane," he roared. "You son of a snake. I knew you'd crawl out from the mud someday." Elias fired again, dropping one of Pike's men before the echo faded. Jeb shot another, his hands trembling, but steady enough to hit. "Flank, Em." Elias barked, moving down the ridge. Bullets ripped the dirt around him as he dove behind a fallen log. Smoke filled his lungs. His blood roared with every heartbeat. "Crane." Pike shouted again. "Come out and die like a man." Elias shouted back, "You first." He broke cover, firing fast. One outlaw went down. Another staggered, clutching his chest. Jeb screamed as a bullet grazed his leg, but kept shooting. Then Pike himself stepped from behind the wagon, twin revolvers in hand, coat whipping in the wind. His face twisted into a cruel grin. "You never should have come back, boy," he snarled. Elias ducked behind a boulder, reloading. "You burn women out of their homes. You think I'd let that stand?" Pike laughed, deep, echoing. "That widow? She ain't your problem, Crane. Ain't never been." Elias peeked around the rock. "She's the only decent thing left on this godforsaken plain." They fired at once, both shots whistling past. The next 2 found their marks. Elias's shoulder jerked as a bullet tore through his coat, grazing flesh. Pike stumbled back, clutching his arm. Jeb crawled to another rock, breathing hard. "He's pulling back." "Not far enough." Elias growled and surged forward. He tackled Pike near the fire. They rolled, fists slamming, boots kicking dirt and ash. Pike swung the butt of his gun, striking Elias's temple. Stars burst in his vision. "Should have stayed dead, soldier," Pike hissed. "You never learn when to quit." Elias spat blood. "Neither did you." He slammed Pike's head into the dirt, wrenched the revolver free, and pressed it against the man's chest. "Go on," Pike croaked. "Do it. See if it brings your brother back." Elias's hand trembled. The rain began again, slow at first. He could see it all. The war, the graves, the burned cabins, the crying children. He could see Mary's face, lit by firelight. He lowered the gun. Pike sneered. You ain't got it in you. Maybe not, Elias said quietly. But she does. A shot rang out. Pike jerked, eyes wide. Mary stood at the ridge, her rifle smoking, her face set in stone. Pike fell back, blood spreading across his shirt, the last of his laugh dying in his throat. Elias looked up at her, rain and tears mixing on his face. You followed us, he said. She nodded once, lowering the gun. You took my fight. I came to finish it. The rain came harder, washing blood into the mud. The outlaws who still breathed ran for their horses and vanished into the gray. The fire hissed and sputtered, dying in the downpour. Elias sank to one knee, clutching his shoulder. You shouldn't have come, he said. Mary walked toward him through the mud, her rifle hanging loosely in her hand. If I hadn't, you'd be lying where he is. Jeb limped closer, soaked to the bone, his face pale but alive. He's dead, right? Elias nodded. He's dead. For a long time, none of them spoke. Only the sound of rain filled the valley. Mary knelt beside Pike's body. So, this is the man who burned our lives, she murmured. He looked smaller now. Elias looked at her, echoing her own words from before. That's what happens when you stop being afraid. She glanced up, eyes meeting his. What now? Elias stood slowly, wincing. Now we go home. The ride back was quiet. The storm began to break again, clouds parting just enough for light to touch the land. Birds called in the distance, hesitant, unsure, as if the world wasn't certain it was done bleeding. When they reached the cabin, the children ran out crying, their feet splashing through puddles. Mary dropped to her knees and caught them both, holding them so tight it hurt. Elias dismounted and leaned against the post, every bone in his body aching. The sight of her alive, holding her children in the golden after-rain light, was almost more than he could bear. Jeb stood a few yards away, uncertain. You think I'll ever be free of him? He asked quietly. Elias looked at him. Freedom ain't given. You work for it. You start today. The boy nodded, then turned to the horizon. Guess I'll ride east. Try my luck someplace nobody knows my name. Elias reached into his coat, pulled out a few coins, and handed them over for the road. Jeb hesitated. I don't deserve this. Neither did I once, Elias said. The boy mounted up, tipped his hat to Mary, and rode off into the sunlight. For a long time they watched him go, the last ghost of Pike's fire fading into the open plain. Mary turned to Elias. You did more than fight a man today. You fought yourself. He gave a dry laugh, not sure which one hurt worse. You came back, she said softly. He looked at her, the faintest trace of warmth breaking through the storm still behind his eyes. I said I would. She smiled, not bright, not easy, but real. Then stay a while. You got walls to mend and a roof that leaks. He nodded, glancing up at the cabin, the land, the wide, unending sky. Guess I can do that. That night, the plains were quiet again. No fire, no gunfire, no screams, just wind and the far cry of coyotes. Mary sat by the hearth, sewing by lamplight. Elias sat across from her, his arm bandaged, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. The children slept near the fire, curled together under a blanket. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Mary said, You ever think about leaving? Finding someplace that doesn't remember you? Elias stared into the flames. Every day. But this land, it's got a way of holding on. Maybe it remembers the best parts, too. She smiled faintly. Maybe it does. He looked at her across the firelight. What about you? I buried one life in the ashes, she said. But maybe this one can grow from what's left. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth. The night felt different, not peaceful exactly, but possible. Elias leaned back, closing his eyes. Guess even burned land can bloom again. Mary watched him, the lines of his face softened in the firelight. And for the first time since her world had burned, she allowed herself to hope. In the silence that followed, the house creaked like an old heart still beating, and somewhere far beyond the hills, dawn began again.